September 20th, 2021, 6 p.m. meeting of the Johnston County Board of Commissioners. I now call the meeting to order. As customary, we do the prayer and the pledge before the meeting. I would ask Mr. Harris if he would do the prayer, and Mr. Smith if he would lead us in the pledge.
Let us pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we pause this evening to thank you for the amazing and wonderful blessings that you bring to each one of us. Father, we thank you for the opportunities that you've given us. We ask that you bless this meeting and lead us and guide us, Father, and help us to make good decisions and be visionary, Lord, and stand for what is right. Father, we pray for the citizens of this county. We pray for all those who work and live and play here in this county, Lord. We just praise you and thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Present.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, first item on the agenda is approval and discussion of the agenda.
I make a motion we adopt the agenda.
Second. Got a motion, got a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is consent agenda items. We've got A through C. Anything need to be pulled, added, or deleted?
So move we approve consent agenda as presented.
Second. We got a motion, got a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have public comment. This is a period where anyone in the audience who would like to address this board for 3 minutes on a topic that is not on the agenda is welcome to do so. Do we have anyone that would like to address this board here tonight on a topic that is not on the agenda? If not, Madam Clerk, emails?
No, sir.
No emails. All right, next on the agenda, McGill Associates, nitrogen offset credits for detention center and public safety center projects. Call on Mr. Simmons.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chairman. If with y'all's permission, may I remove my mask?
Sure.
Thank you. My name is Chad Simmons. I'm with McGill Associates. I'm the site civil engineer of record for the detention center and public safety center projects out on Highway 7 here in Smithfield. And I was asked to come tonight to present to you guys some information about total nitrogen buy-down as it relates to those two projects. We've reached the point in our permitting where we need to execute a buy-down of that nitrogen, and I wanted to come to the board and present that information to you guys tonight. So, let's see here. For anyone who may not be familiar with what nitrogen buy-down is, or nitrogen offsets, nitrogen pollution is generated when a development site is constructed. And it is a function of impervious area and your overall tract area. So the higher your impervious area in general, the higher the nitrogen runoff will be. And nitrogen is carried off the site through stormwater. That's a requirement of our permit with the town of Smithfield, our stormwater permit. And that limits that nitrogen export to 3.6 pounds per acre per year. If that maximum is exceeded, we have two options. We can either treat that stormwater on site with the construction of stormwater control measures like wet detention ponds or bioretention basins, or we may purchase offsetting credits through private mitigation banks. Why are these needed at our site? Well, the construction of the detention center and the public safety center will far exceed 3.6 pounds per acre per year. Typically, the cost to construct and maintain an on-site stormwater control measure is far more expensive than that it would cost to offset that nitrogen. Not only is it expensive to construct, it's very expensive to maintain. That must be maintained in perpetuity. So We typically recommend that offsetting credits be purchased when possible and when it works within the permit. That was the case here with those two projects. So the final question, I'm sure you, well, not the final question, but the last question I'll address is how much that offset was going to cost for these two projects. In our process, we reached out to 3 private mitigation banks that service this basin. Of those 3, 1 was unresponsive, 1 had no offsets available for purchase at that time, and 1 indicated that they would have offsets available for purchase in September. We received an email letting us know that those offsets were available, so we indicated our interest in purchasing those and secured 2 invoices from that private mitigation bank. The price is $23.50 per pound, and that is pretty much the going rate from any mitigation bank in this basin. Again, that was only 1 was responsive with having credits available up to 3. So for the detention center, we were, by permit, we had to purchase, hold on a second, I'll let you know here, 1,870 pounds of nitrogen at $23.50 for a total of $43,945. And for the public safety center, that was 2,039.04 pounds of nitrogen for $23.50 a pound, comes out to $47,917.44. So at this point, I would entertain any questions from the board.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we approve this expenditure.
I'll second.
We got a motion, we got a second. Is there any further discussion?
I was thinking that in the plans, there was retention ponds on these sites. Is that doesn't come into play here, is that right?
It can, and it does come into play here. We ended up, there are 2 parts of the, in general, there are 2 parts of the Town of Smithfield Stormwater Code that have to be met. One is the total nitrogen buy-down that we just discussed. The other is detention of stormwater rate of runoff. So those detention ponds that we designed for this site were designed primarily to detain the water to meet that pre-development peak runoff rate, okay? Now, as dry ponds, and they were designed to be dry ponds, and we prefer dry ponds because, again, they're low cost to construct, low cost of maintenance. The biggest maintenance item on a dry detention pond typically is just mowing it. So that's what we went with. Now, the first dry pond that serves the detention center was designed for a long-term detention. So for the impervious areas that drain to that detention pond, we did get a 10% reduction in the total nitrogen. That's why with the detention center, even though it has much more impervious area than the public safety center, the buy-down was lower because we were able to treat fairly low cost, fairly easy, that stormwater that was generated and get a reduction. We could not achieve that with the public safety center. Even though we had to put that dry pond in, we did not have enough room to make that pond big enough to detain that volume of stormwater long enough.
With some of our wastewater treatment, we buy nitrogen credits from time to time. Our Director of Public Utilities, does this have any bearing on her ability to continue doing that?
No, not to my knowledge.
That's all I have.
Any further questions or discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is Parks, Greenways, and Open Space. East Clayton Elementary School boat ramp property purchase. We'll call on our own Mr. O'Neill.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We've got a piece of property that we've talked about before. It's 2.84 acres that is associated with East Clayton Elementary School. It's already being used for a impromptu boat ramp, and it's fairly unsafe the way it's set up now. And what we would like to do is purchase that piece of property from the school system, bring it into the county, and then work with the town of Clayton to put a boat ramp in there. They have said that they are interested in doing that, working with wildlife, putting a proper boat ramp in for car top boats only, and that'd be canoes and kayaks. It will have emergency service access. We will make sure that's in there just in case we have an emergency on the river. So that's what that first item is.
Adrian, is this on Castleberry Road?
Yes, sir.
How far from the 42 intersection?
It's right on the corner. There's a pumping station on that corner, and there's a tract of land right on the corner, and it'll all be right together.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the purchase of the East Clayton Elementary School property.
Second.
We've got a motion, we got a second. Is there any further questions or discussion?
Years ago, they used to have a canoe race. Various people sponsored it. And they would put in the river, well, sometimes on, but they would finish right there at the 42 bridge. And it's a good place to get in and out for that type of craft.
Yeah, and Wildlife does a great job at these ramps now. They've done so many of them, they can almost do them with their eyes closed.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they will be glad to help us in Clayton to get something in there that's really nice.
And I'd just like to add that, this is the second project really in a week that we've seen the collaboration between the county, the school system, and in this case, the town of Clayton. And I want to thank you for kind of being the one, the catalyst to make that happen, to draw everything together. But it is not only a great opportunity for the town of Clayton, but all the citizens of Johnston County to have a spot to get in and out of the river. And I hope there's more opportunities somewhere down the line.
And well, right now we only have 2 access points on the river that are official access points, and this will add a third. And the Johnston, or Wake County, I think has 8. Wayne County has 8, and we have 2 in Johnston County. So we need to do a little catch up on that.
We're behind.
Mr. Chair, I will also add that the public safety aspect of this is tremendous. The access to the river, having run rescue on that river for many, many years, it's a real concern of having those access points. So this, to me, is a big selling point for this project as well, is to have that public safety access. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion?
I got a question, Adrian, but after I vote.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Question about, is it Fire Department Road, Wilson Mills? The big hill that crosses the Neuse River, below 42.
Gotcha.
Has there been any discussion about a ramp that runs parallel with the road? The Sports Council at one time had discussed that.
I have not heard anything on that, but I can check into it.
Okay. All right.
It's a great place for one.
Yeah.
Okay, next on our agenda is Mr. O'Neill also, Parks, Greenways, Open Space, Feasibility Study, East Coast Greenway and Mountains to Sea Trail. What you got for us, Mr. O'Neill?
As y'all may know, the Mountains to Sea Trail goes from, or is supposed to go from Clayton to Smithfield, and in some respects it's stalled because of some of the land not being available. Now there is a water path which the Neuse River provides that, and there is a road path, but in the hiking world people don't like to hike on the road and it's very unsafe, and the whole intent was eventually to have a true hiking trail that spanned from the mountains to the sea. In getting that to move forward, we were approached by the Upper Coastal Plain RPO, and they applied for a DOT feasibility study with us in mind and state parks in mind, and they were awarded that study by DOT. It's a $150,000 study, and we have a share of it, which is $7,500. And what I would like to do, this feasibility study will look at the current proposed route and look at anything that's unavailable now and look at places that are available so they can change the route and get a good route in place so that we're not saying, well, it could go here, it could go here. They want to get a route on the ground or on the maps that we can start working on the ground. And that's what this study will do. They have a completion date by July of next year. So it's a quick turnaround study. It's a good company that they've got a contract with. It's McAdams. This company has, the principal is Iona Thomas. Iona Thomas was on the East Coast Greenway board, and she's pretty sharp. So the request is for $7,500 to meet our portion of the $150,000 to pay for this feasibility study.
Will they actually contact landowners?
They will be contacting landowners in groups, and the large landowners in that area, they'll probably contact them individually. And not only are they looking at potential path, but they're looking at the viability of the path so that it's not flooded every time it rains. So they're looking at building a complete trail, something that can be maintained and has resilience also.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the $7,500 for this.
Second.
We've got a motion, we got a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Before I get to the next item on the agenda, I failed to mention that we obviously are missing a commissioner. He had an appointment this afternoon, and apparently it ran later than he was anticipating. So hopefully everything's good. Next on the agenda is Town of Princeton, request for funding, drainage, and water line projects.
Good evening. First, I have a request that we honor September 19th as a county holiday, as long as it falls on Sunday. Happy birthday, Rick. We're here to talk, to follow up on our meeting on flood mitigation and water line funding. And I've had a few comments from commissioners as I've been working with them that a lot of the flood water and the water lines that come to Princeton actually start out. The water lines come from Wilson Mills to Princeton. The flood water starts above Princeton and flows through Princeton and then goes back out to the county. So it's not just a unique Princeton problem. It's everyone's got a little bit of skin in the game. Other comments were that as subdivision regulations and zoning is requiring 30,000 square foot lots, it's important to have infrastructure in closer to municipalities where we could have denser housing and schools to be put rather than making new sewer lines way out in the county for schools. So I just want to add that as a comment. What we're asking for is, in our flood mitigation request and water line is a need, not a want. The $3,225,000, we're requesting $715,000 for flood and $400,000 for the water line. We have poor water quality in Princeton and in the Broadman Water District because of lack of water line connections and low pressure. Marla Ashworth will define DEQ studies that she has to present as well. And the lack of water line pressure and fire protection along Massey Holt Road is also a problem because some homes have very low protection in terms of fire, and fire hydrants cannot be put there. Our Fire Chief Randy Jones and County Fire Marshal Adam Stuckey will make that part of the presentation, and I'll turn it over to Marla, and if there's questions we certainly can address.
In relation to the water line and the water quality, we did some research today, and since July of 1993, we have had 27 water violations related to trihalomethanes, which are a byproduct of the chlorination process, which averages out like once a year that we've had a violation that we had to respond to. And usually when we get those, we're right on the borderline. And the months and quarters we haven't been on the borderline of that is because we have flushed tens of thousands of water out of the system to raise the, I'm not sure how it, well, I think we're raising the chlorine residual to get rid of the trihalomethanes. It's really technical. But anyway, that's what we have to do to not have those violations, is flush tens of thousands of gallons of water out of our system. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak on this item?
Mr. Mayor asked me to be here, and the fire chief asked me to be here. So I have to correction him. Not Adam Stuckey, Adam Stanley. I'm sorry. He's a good guy as well. So the fire chief, Randy Jones, was speaking to me about the project and want to know to help me arrange out, explain some. So yes, there is a need for a water line out there for fire protection. Obviously, we know it makes firefighting a lot easier when there's hydrants to connect to. We do have other alternate means, which is the tanker task force that the fire chief can call for, but that means a long response time because you're calling for more tankers to come from the parts of the county, as well as more manpower intensive process. So as far as the water line goes and fire protection, yes, there is a need. It would make the job a lot easier for the firefighters, and we are limited on manpower as volunteers. But we do have alternate things in place that could also assist. It just takes a little longer to get those things in place.
In a nutshell, hydrants are a whole lot more efficient.
They're much more
safer,
much more efficient, much more safer because you can less manpower and faster connectivity to get water on a fire.
Okay, and for the people at home and I'm sure board members, there's actually two requests on the table, so the public needs to know we're not convoluting the two. We've got a stormwater issue, and then we've got a separate water hydrant issue that don't have anything to do with one another,
yes,
other
sir.
than it's both in the town.
Yes, sir, that's correct. I can't speak to the stormwater,
right,
but only for the fire.
But it's all coming so fast and so intertwined, and I think it's important that everybody understands that we're dealing with two separate total issues.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
I was just going to, since you brought up both the issues, can we handle the water issue first? And then
I wish that it came in as two separate requests. Right, it's very confusing to make good decisions and to get data on when it kind of came in like it did. So, as for right now, if that's your request, I think that's a good idea. Let's handle the water line issue.
Can we get the mayor up here? Speak.
Sure, you can get, yeah.
Mr. Raines?
Now, we're on water line right now, right?
We also have 3 commissioners and members of the public that are here if they want to raise their hand.
Well, thank you, and I recognize one that slipped in, and I normally try to recognize elected officials that are in the meeting as I recognize them, but it kind of come in a little later. But thank y'all for being here.
Scotty Brown and Broderick Robinson.
Okay, thank y'all.
Appreciate it.
Well, the mask too threw me off a little bit, so.
We got the high sheriff back there, so he's
And
right.
the sheriff, how do we forget the high sheriff? Of course, we're going to get a chance to introduce him in a minute, I'm sure.
From what I understand, we've talked about several issues as far as the water line and some issues as far as the drainage. The drainage, and don't let me speak for anybody else, I'm just trying to explain this best way I know it. The water line, I feel like that there's a percentage part of it that will also benefit the county as a whole. So I've been mulling it through my mind, a percentage of the total cost versus the county. Is that the first time you've heard that?
No, I think that's, in talking with Rick over the months, it's just has become more of a need for that line to be added. I don't know what occurred when the Princeton County Water District was created. That water line connected to Princeton. When the Broadman Water District was created, That line stopped about 1.5 miles south of town. I don't know whether funds ran out or the scope ran out, but that line would protect the houses that's in that area outside our ETJ, and also protect the houses inside our ETJ, and obviously present better water quality to the town.
Okay, I mean, as far as everybody's concerned, does everybody agree with that statement of, is this something we can take apart and get fixed?
I think it's just determining what the right amount is. I'd like to hear from our county manager on this issue.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, and I've had several discussions with Mayor Raines and Ms. Ashworth, and I appreciate all the time that they've spent on these projects, discussing them with us. On the water line, our recommendation would be 1/3 of the cost of the estimated $400,000. I don't think the line has been designed yet, so this is still early. But 1/3 of the $400,000 up to that. If the line comes in more than that, maybe we could discuss that. I mean, the way things are so volatile now with pricing and materials, and but that would be our recommendation.
But once again, we don't have any final numbers. We've just got an estimate of 400,000, and we really don't. Your recommendation is 1/3, but I have heard through that. Not saying that's wrong, but it could possibly be close to 40% of a total benefit. Probably not more than 50%.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, that's just our initial recommendation.
Okay.
Chairman, can I?
Yeah, please. You would state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Mike Rose, County Commissioner. Not sorry, Town Commissioner. I would like to say thank you for everyone's consideration for what you can possibly do for us. I would like to respectfully disagree with Mr. Hester in the fact that the request that's on the table for the water line is primarily to benefit county water customers, and in fact, it will benefit no town water customers. There will be no added revenue to the town in the foreseeable future. I can't say houses won't pop up in the future, but for now, we buy our water from the county, and we have 28 violations of problems with the water that we buy from the county. So we're asking for the county to help us have better water quality with the water that we buy from you, if you see what I'm saying. So it's not as if we are trying to make money off of it. We want our constituents, our townspeople to have the best water quality possible, and we buy it from you guys. So by completing this water line from the edge of town down Massey Holt, we will then be able to have better water quality, and the county will be able to supply their customers, the county customers, with better water quality, better water pressure, potential hydrates, and so forth. And so that's why I think that it is it's imperative that we fund 100% of this project with the county funds, because, as I said, it is a product that you guys are selling to us, and it will improve that product and improve the quality out into the county beyond Princeton. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
And I appreciate Councilman Rose saying that, and the main reason that our recommendation was what it is because it would be going by a lot of large vacant tracts of land, and just that hopefully one day will be residential, mayor, and commercial, and that kind of thing. So I know that the county does not subsidize future residential development, and that was the only reason our recommendation was 1/3. But we certainly respect anything the board decides to do on that.
Okay.
And I would concur with Commissioner Rose, Town Commissioner, not anything beyond that at this point. This project is eligible for American Rescue money, so it's not, could be funded outside the county's utility budget or tax budget, property tax budget. So it could be funded out of American Rescue Funds 100% if the board inclined to do so. And there will be future housing in that area as our town grows, but there's not immediate need because, as recognized at the last meeting, we are 3 to 5 years away from expanding our sewer treatment plant, and that would be needed to expand subdivisions in that area.
Yeah, I guess what would validate Mr. Rose would be, which you made great points. There are customers, it'll enhance our customers, it'll help our customers safer, towns not benefiting really any whatsoever. But with the open land, if it was a guarantee that it would never be annexed to the town and they would remain and all future houses would be county customers solely, then it would kind of validate that. But we know that's not going to be the case, so it kind of makes it still a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, and someone building a subdivision that close to town would want sewer as well as water.
That's right.
Well, let me go ahead and lay my cards out on the table. Now, I'm still a little fuzzy on the drain stuff, so we're just dealing with this issue right now. But I do appreciate development in town. I appreciate schools in town. I appreciate the county, and I know that going forward, whatever we come up with on the land study and the growth study, going forward, I'd like to see rooftops in towns. So I agree with your town commissioner. I mean, I'd like to see growth in a place where it has parks, that has sidewalks, that has police departments, that has trash service, to where we don't have so many pop-up towns all over the county.
And let me piggyback on that real quick. I had a meeting today with a guy on a total separate issue as it pertains to Smithfield. Nothing to do with this. And brought good points. Look, you're doing a land use study, and you've also done some small additions or modifications to your land use plan to make larger. Basically, you are putting things in place to do exactly what you're saying. You're trying to push these growth to our towns. How are you helping the towns with the growth that they're receiving? And if you're not prepared to do that, then why don't you just leave it like it was? So there is definitely other towns and stuff concerned with, hey, we want it. This is apparently what you're looking for as a board, and we're not seeming to get any assistance. So,
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to make a motion. I think we've heard a recommendation of a third. We've heard 100%. Do you have something else? Okay, sure.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'll try to keep that thought.
Thank you. And two, whatever the board chooses, we would recommend these come out of public utility funds. So just wanted to.
Okay.
There's funds that are already budgeted for these type of connections and things throughout the year.
And so I'll try to get back on track here, but I think that we've heard 30, or a third from staff. We've heard 100% from the representative of the town. And my motion would be for us to fund 50% up to a total of $200,000 based on our estimate right now. If it goes over that, they can come back for us for additional, but 50% for a total of $200,000 to contribute to this project.
I second that motion.
oh, we got a motion, we got a second. Now, we've already discussed it. Is there any more discussion on this?
I've got some discussion. I'll ask the staff. Should this have any contingency? I know we talked about some things about contingency of it meeting certain conditions, but you said this would come from public utility budgets?
Yes, sir, Mr. Godwin. This would come out of already funds that are existing in public.
So we don't need to have a contingency that it meet requirements of the
No, sir. Now, the
government
other
funds.
project, if
Right.
anything happens there, it's been discussed about American Rescue Funds.
Right.
However that turns out, then we would
Okay.
certainly want
I
maybe
got
a memorandum of understanding and that kind of thing, but
Thank you.
these would, thank you.
Any more discussion? Well, in order to help Princeton, I think I'm gonna have to vote for the motion. I would, obviously, it's my district, and I would like a little more, but hey, we get what we can get. So, if there's no more discussion, all in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you, commissioners. We'll work on the rest of it.
We've got another request on the table. I guess we need to address it. Once again, it was very confusing how it came in and how we normally process requests with this board, but it's obviously open for discussion, for a motion, or whatever this board chooses.
If you don't mind, so that way they can avoid having to make a necessary presentation, but since we're dealing with different funds, ARP funds, we've talked about establishing a fund to set aside to assist our towns with, but we don't have a criteria yet to decide how we're going to decide if a project first meets a public purpose, which I think all the projects that we fund need to have some benefit to all the citizens of the county, and I think that's where we get staff recommendations in, and then we need to decide, what the pot of money we're looking at rather than unlimited pot, and then how we're going to distribute that. And I'd like to see staff come up with some sort of plan, if that's 2 weeks or a month, whatever it is, something we can have some basis for making a decision, rather than, Princeton come now and next week Archer Lodge is here and they have a larger request, and then all of a sudden our pot of money is gone for the other towns. So that's my fundamental concern is, one, we need to make sure that storm drainage meets a criteria for public purpose that has a benefit for the county, not just individual towns, and then how do we decide to spend that money. So no, that's my suggestion as we wait till staff brings us something back, hopefully in 2 weeks, but I don't want to put them to some unreasonable time frame.
Well, as it pertains to the stormwater issue that we're dealing with right now on the table, a public purpose, I'm sure they can make somewhat of an argument on how it would help once these corrections are done, or these projects. But from a public purpose standpoint, could there be an argument made that a lot of stuff that we've done in the county might be causing this problem?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I would be in favor actually of funding this request, because when you look at, I don't know the engineering of all of it, but I know a lot of this stormwater that Princeton's having to deal with came from the county. And when it leaves Princeton, it goes to the county, and we have to deal with it. So I'd be in favor of funding this project.
Well, once again, I don't know many years y'all have come to county commissioners about drainage issues in Princeton, and I know in the last 30 there's been a lot of change to the landscape in this county. And now we've had some tough weather lately with the rains and stuff, and nothing's ever going to prevent that. But
Mr. Chairman, I've tried to listen to what the other commissioners have said. I think Commissioner Lauder makes good points. I think Commissioner Godwin makes good points. But we don't have the facts. We don't have the facts. We need the facts. And I would suggest that we charge our staff to come in and tell us how much of that water comes from the county, how much of that water goes back to the county, what is our responsibility, and what kind of overall plan do we have so that we treat all towns fairly. So I just think, I'm not saying yes or no to this request, I just think we need some facts and study to make a good decision that's fair for all our citizens.
And I would kind of piggyback on, and we have the town's engineers here that can speak further to this, but based on the information we got last time, the drainage, the drainage areas we were talking about before aren't coming from far outside of town. So, and they can speak more to this, but so it's not really, at least in my mind, it's not a county-generated problem. It is more of a localized problem, and the engineers can speak more to this than I can.
We have experts that work for our county. We need to hear from them and give them a chance to tell us what their opinion is, so we can make, hopefully, I know this may not sound great in the political world, hopefully an intelligent decision as to how to answer this question.
Well, and you were furnished 3 to 4 weeks ago with engineering reports from 3 different flood stories, flood studies by our engineers. You had a presentation at last week's meeting that went through our downtown project, which is funded by the Golden Leaf, and the project that goes through the southern end of Princeton, which is not funded except for our American Rescue dollars, which we need a match to complete that work. Now, when it rains 20-some inches during Hurricane Matthew, or 9 inches in a 3-hour period, is this going to cure all problems? No, but it will certainly be helpful. But delaying it for 2 weeks or a month or 6 weeks is not going to help this situation. I've got a lady here. Your house, how much water was in your yard or house?
Ma'am,
Up to the house, some of it went under the house.
you're not comfortable coming to the, okay, that's fine, okay.
Mr. Mayor, I understand what you're saying. I don't think 2 weeks is material. I think we want to charge our staff to come back and make a recommendation with some facts in 2 weeks, and then I think we can act on your request.
Mr. Mayor, can I intervene real quick? I think we're all trying to get to the same place. Okay, as I said in the beginning, they kind of everything came in kind of tough, and there were 2 different projects, and for us to process and staff get data and whatnot, and we've got to one place on one of them. It's not where obviously I want to be, but it's, or I wanted to be, but it's the best that we could get to, and we've got that one taken care of. Now, with this stormwater, I know when you presented, there's like 4 corners of Princeton. I know, you know the old saying, I need some money, I need it now. That never is really a good thing, because people want all the information they can get, and y'all have got engineers but provided the information. But all these projects are not going to start at the same time. Some have got to be more pressing than others. If you got a commissioner that's willing to vote for this, and he's not made his mind up yet, I think we really need to, and you've heard what Mr. Lauder said, we don't need to let the door shut on this.
Yeah, I would say, Mr. Mayor, that there's no bigger advocate for Princeton than you and your commissioners. And we're...
No.
I was going to know, and his commissioner.
And me.
No, well, yeah, okay, yeah. He's, but we have to look, when I was on the council in Clayton, same thing. That was my area. So no, as a commissioner, I have a whole county to look at. So what we do for you, we've got to look at doing for the 10 other towns. So we've got to, in my mind, we've got to be careful what kind of precedent we set before we go forward. And I think the project, I'm not against the project. Let me say that I am not against the project, but I like to have some basis for us making decisions going forward. And you had brought something up, and I think maybe the engineers can speak to this. I know there's phases, and if they could speak to what that urgent need is, that may help us.
And Mr. Clayton will come up, but the first phase is the southern end of town, where it is constantly flooding, and it would be fixing drainage tile by DOT, which they're going to be doing, and fixing drainage through properties that go from Pine Street in Holtz Pond Road south towards Wayne County, which a whole subdivision is constantly flooding. Another subdivision is constantly flooding. The baseball park is constantly, Little League Park is constantly flooding, and primarily because the area is flat. What this intends to do is work on an elevation scale and get the water out. If there's any additional money left, we'll be working on Beaver Dam Creek to get it flowing more correctly, but I will bring our
Well, and let me add something, because I've been in a lot of the conversation. And we're talking about taxpayer money, which all government money is taxpayer in some form or fashion. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect on this money is not being requested from our general fund, so the citizens of this county are not using their ad valorem tax dollars to pay for this project. It's coming out of money that come down from the federal government that were designed for certain projects. But duly noted, there is a lot that the county has to use that money for. Duly noted. How fair are we going to use it with other towns? Is the pot going to get used up before another request or need comes in? And we only have a time limit to spend this federal money, or it has to be returned what is not spent. So maybe they probably, for the public, should have been a little bit of guidance on exactly what the county is doing with the money that we received and what the plans are already. So basically, it's not a free-for-all. Everybody get the projects done, because a lot of it's already allocated for county purposes. So I just kind of wanted to clear that up.
Mr. Mayor, I want to vote for you, I want to help you, but if you're going to force me to vote tonight, I'm going to vote no. Okay? I've got to get some facts. I've got to do my homework. That's all we're asking.
Well, let the engineers speak on some of the questions that you have.
I want your engineers talk to our engineers. I'm not an engineer. They can talk for 2 hours, and it won't mean anything to me. That's why we pay Rick and his staff to make recommendations to us. And all we're asking is that you talk to our staff and let us hear from our staff so we can help you.
Yeah, I agree. I think we want to help you help us help you kind of thing. We want to help them help us get to that decision.
So I'm not, my problem is I don't have clarity of exactly what you're wanting 2 weeks to do, because obviously our engineer can work with your engineer, but if you wanting a water flow from the northern end of the county through
Let me help you. Let me help you. We pay a lot of money to this man and his staff, and they do a great job. And they have a duty to bring to us the facts about what's best for the county, what's best for the taxpayers. And all we're asking, and all I'm asking, is that your engineers and your technical people work with our engineers and our technical people so we can get their recommendation. Just like Rick came forward and recommended paying a third of the water line. That is the reason I voted to pay for 50%, because the other commissioners wanted that. But his recommendation that was a nexus to the counties and our responsibility is why I believe that got passed tonight. All we're asking is, on this stormwater, that your experts work with our experts so we can receive a good recommendation, have a sound basis to approve what you need.
Okay, let me stop it right there. And another good point is, obviously, this topic has come to us about 3 times, and we've got a board member missing tonight that would probably be upset if the vote on this scale was slighted. So it probably fits into what you're asking for. This man being here might be important to y'all. Is that in the form of a motion?
If you want it, you can have it.
Is there a time frame that you want to put on the motion?
2 weeks.
So my thought is the criteria that Rick and staff are not dependent on Princeton's project. It is a county-wide decision matrix that we're going to come up with. Obviously, Princeton needs to be involved in it and make sure that along the way they're aware of what we're headed to. But I think our decision is based on a county-wide basis, not on Princeton's case alone. Otherwise, we're back to square one. It's a county-wide framework that we're looking for. Now, I think there's other discussions.
And I think you might be talking about 2 different things.
Well,
I think you're talking about how we're going to treat other towns. And
well, I mean, I can't treat Princeton different than I can anybody else.
Right, but I think what he's saying is if you don't have that plan and that plan don't come available, what is satisfying him is if he can have our county engineer come and tell us what portion of $700,000 would be a benefit to our county residents.
I think, let me make a motion. I make a motion that we charge our staff, number one, to do the best that they can to come up with a recommendation on the $5 million. Is it American.
I think that's our portion we've allocated
Right,
towards
yeah.
towns, right?
That they come up with some recommendation with that, and that they also come up and tell us on this stormwater needs that Princeton has. We've said a lot of different things. Some people have said the county's doing this and that. It comes from the county, goes back to the county. Other people have said that may not necessarily be right. I'm not technically competent to decide that. I would like to hear from our experts. And then at our first meeting in October, we can make a decision. I make that as a motion. I think.
Sir, I'm not real sure with parliamentary procedure
Yeah.
that you can, I think that we've got a motion on the floor.
Yeah, that's right.
And part of our discussion now, not that I never want to hear from the public, but we've,
I'm on the board in Princeton. Can I address y'all?
well, technically, I don't know how this board feels about that, yeah.
I think we need to finish our.
Second it. Now we can discuss.
You got a second?
Second his motion.
Okay.
Discuss it.
Now we can further discussion.
So the councilman.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, there we go.
No, hey, I don't, you know as much about it as I do.
Yeah, I'm not that experienced with all this stuff, but as I hear you guys talking, I just kind of want to say this, and I don't want to sound out of place or out of line, but the town of Princeton, every single person that lives in Princeton is a citizen of Johnston County. So it seems like there's kind of some, I don't know, it seems as though they're, we're treating it as, they're not citizens of Johnston County. So I just ask that you, remember that, and it is a major issue. We have about $3 million worth of work that needs to be done, and we're asking for, $700,000. So, yeah, that's it. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that? The citizens of Princeton are very important citizens. We want to meet their needs, okay? I just think it's important that this county, the towns in this county, understand there's 4 buckets. And I'm gonna simplify something that's more complicated than that. The governmental taxing authority, the government gives us power to tax and take money from our citizens, which is what taxing is, for a specific purpose. They give the federal government taxing authority to do certain things. They give the state government taxing authority and certain responsibilities. They give the county taxing authority and certain responsibilities. And they give towns taxing authority and certain responsibilities. So the issue is not whether it's a good project or bad project. The issue is whether the governmental body is using the money that they take from their taxpayer to discharge the purpose for which they were entitled to take that money. And all we're trying to do as a board is to be true to our taxpayers, to make sure that when we took 73%, 73 cents per thousand of their property, that we used it for the purpose that we took it for. Okay? All we're trying to do is discharge our responsibility. We're not trying to in any way not show the people of Princeton that they're important. We believe they're important. But just like Butch said, or Chairman Lawler, or Commissioner Lawler, excuse me.
I'm okay with that.
There are 10 other
That's 3 times.
And there are a lot of other people. And we have to make hard decisions. And we're just trying to do a good job to make sure we're good stewards
I understand.
of what we're elected for, okay?
Yes, sir.
And that is a valid point, and it's hard to argue with an attorney, former attorney, or Mr. Smith. But we were elected in different areas, different ways, pretty much by the same constituents, some different. We don't all feel that way. And so I've got a different idea of what the county money and how. I was elected and entrusted by the people to spend their money that they had to pay in the best way I saw fit. So mine not necessarily agree to do something a little different. So I just see it a different way. But
Yeah, I don't want you or anybody else to interpret what I'm saying as I'm against this project. I need to have a framework where I can approve this project and make sure I'm following what Commissioner Smith said. I've taken the whole county into consideration, so don't take anything I've said as I'm opposed to this project.
I don't think anybody's
I want to wait to approve it.
I don't think anyone's spoken out against the project. I think, and I'll just speak from myself personally, my biggest concern is the fairness. How do we, because we're striking out on some new territory here, and when we fund this at whatever level we do, if we do, then how do we administer that fairly across the county? Because it is the whole county. It's not just the folks in Princeton, which I got a lot of good friends in Princeton, and I appreciate them. And I think everybody up here wants to help and do as much as they can. But all those are factors, and I think that's all we're trying to do is just kind of cautiously move into this thing and see how we can help you and still be true to our mission and also set ourselves up for fairness to the other towns throughout the county.
Great point. And I think, and I know Mr. Lauder wants a matrix. That's the way engineers are. They definitely like their facts and understand that. I'm not sure that we're going to get a complete matrix on how to do it everywhere. I think we can get some good ideas. I think we can get close to one maybe. But I think it's going to boil down to just case-by-case basis. I mean, there are going to be requests. Our towns are going to need some help in certain areas. We all know it's not a free-for-all. But once again, we were elected to make tough decisions. That's what our job is, and we're not going to all feel the same way about it. And if we had a complete matrix on how county government was supposed to run, we wouldn't need to be up here tonight, and I could be eating supper.
Call
the question.
One more question.
I do have a point to make about the money we're asking for is out of the American Recovery Plan. And local governments, county government or town government, during the 50s, the Institute of Government was founded by Albert Coates from Johnston County. And through the Institute of Government, interlocal agreements were put together, council governments were set up throughout the state. We've had sharing agreements with the county on water lines, high level, and Four Oaks has had sewer line agreements. Obviously, industry and Clayton has had much more agreements because that's location, location, location. 2 weeks is fine. I'm just saying we're not reinventing the wheel on how to help local municipalities. But if this project is truly needed, and we need to move ahead as soon as possible, not, whatever study needs to be done. I'm sure our engineer will work with the county. But, we don't need to wait till 2022.
Okay. Been called to question. Thank you for everybody's participation. Obviously, you care much about your town as we care about the county, and that's the way it should be, and thank you. Got a motion, got a second? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I want to also recognize Councilman Marlon Lee from the
He did slip in on me.
He came in at midstream. Councilman Lee, glad to have you here.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I did see him slip in. We want some heat. All right, next on the agenda, soil and water conservation easement program. Mr. Walker here to present.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg Walker here, Johnston Soil and Water Conservation District. My presentation tonight is about conservation easements. It's largely informational, but I would like to try to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. I think I have some slides, and you're going to advance them for me. Okay. Very good. So I want to go ahead and slide number 2 and really quickly move into this, if I could. I want to try to cover really quick tonight what is a conservation easement. You may know, you may not. I think I can shed a little light on that subject. Why conservation easements now? Why are they important in Johnston County? I want to make that case if I can in a few minutes. How are conservation easements funded? What are the costs? of entering into conservation easements in Johnston County. Well, I'll just let you know, that next phrase on that slide is my words, and I don't know how to say it any plainer. The Johnston Soil and Water Board believes that it's time, if we're going to get into the business of conservation easement, it's time to do it. And so I kind of want to move from there. The next slide, number 3, I want to call your attention that we do take agriculture very seriously in Johnston County, as evidenced by the JoCo Grows movement. That's a lot of local growers that are interested in their occupation and their love of agricultural production and a way of life. Johnston County is a significant agricultural county, as you know. The JoCo Grows talks about it in their stats right here on this slide: 1,000 farm families, 183,000 acres, and $200 million annually as revenue. So I didn't see tobacco in that stat, but if you had tobacco, that's more than that. The next thing to think about in the next slide, number 4, would be to remind us all that we, in 2006, as a Board of Commissioners, unanimously voted for the voluntary agricultural district. That is short story on that is it's a gentleman's agreement that this farmland that I'm farming on right now is important. I've got a sign out front that says everybody knows who buys land in Johnston County that there's an ag operation here, and so that's important. Johnston County has 607 parcels to date, over 19,000 acres in voluntary ag districts. So the next step, what I want to talk about is conservation easements. That's about protecting farmland. So it's a step up in complexity, but also in importance to protecting farmland in Johnston County. As you know, there's plenty of pressure to convert farmland in Johnston County. We're growing very, very fast. I think among the fastest in the state, if not the fastest, the last number of years. Johnston County is cropland is not only important locally, but it's also important statewide. I want to show you in the next couple of slides, it's also important nationwide. So I want to make that case for us. And I want to, the next few slides I have are taken from the American Farmland Trust report that they put out in 2018, summarizing data information about development around the nation. And so we hit this report. So I just want to call out a few things to your attention.
Excuse me, I can't read that key. What is the green color?
The green color is what I want to call your attention to, and that is important ag lands in this country. If you did not know where that was, this should begin to illustrate to you what the upper Midwest means to us. But if in your scale, now you may be able to see a little bit better. Nah, it's still too small, but the scale, look at the coastal plain of North Carolina. We were on the edge of that right there. Yep. So we do have plenty of important farmland in this state, but also this country. The next slide, number 7, really puts the finger on us as a state, but also Texas for 2 reasons. One, Texas has converted more land. Of course, everything's big in Texas. But North Carolina gets the finger because it's a higher percentage of ag lands impacted. Higher percentage of ag lands impacted. And so Johnston County is right there in that discussion. The next slide, number 8, again, reinforces that important ag lands in this country. But also take a look at that one. The dark red splotches are our urban centers. Look right there at Raleigh. You know about where that is. And look just south of there is an orange, big orange spot. Well, that's the rural or really urban sprawl or the less dense development where we basically residential. Okay, so that's kind of what it's talking about. And the next slide, simply number 9, is simply a tabular data in the appendix of that long report that I put in just in case you wanted to look closer at it. But look on the top left column. It puts its finger on us in Texas in this report. And that was made, the Commissioner of Agriculture made a big deal about that in his report a couple years ago. This report is on his website. Moving on, number 10. So what's the purpose of the easement, the conservation easement? And from our perspective, is to protect agricultural lands in Johnston County. That is our primary intent and purpose. There are easements that do a lot of things. For example, there's easements that protect riparian corridors. There are easements that protect wetlands specifically or wildlife habitats. But our purpose is protecting farmland, good farmland. Protections, how long they last? It's not a contract. It's a permanent easement. It goes into perpetuity. Hard word to say. So but how do they work? How do easements work? Well, the next slide is an illustration that has been used over and over in my past experience in the easement type of a business or responsibility. This is a good illustration of what a conservation easement does. It's the bundle of sticks. What we're doing, a conservation easement does to protect farmland, is simply going to remove the development rights. It's transfer development rights, but it's really removing the development rights. That makes sense? You can still, you have water rights, hunting rights, farming rights, mineral rights, everything except development rights. So that's what's removed. The next slide, number 12, how do we value an easement? Well, it's trying to arrive at some value of what that easement has done to the value of the property. Well, what is the value of the easement before? What is the value of the land before the easement? What's the value of the land after, once the easement is placed? So if the value of a piece of property is this at its highest and best use, is this amount of money, but the value of the development is this, well, we're paying for this. So the land can be bought and sold in forever as farmland, but it just cannot be developed. That is what's going on. So it's done by an appraisal. There's strict qualifications to that or guidelines, and that appraisal arrives at an appraised fair market value, and that's what how a landowner begins to be compensated for the easement. So what are the costs overall? Of course, the big costs are the value of the easements, and that is there are state and federal funds that we would be going after to help promote these easements and secure them. But there's also survey, appraisal, closing costs, include title work and those kind of things. But we have staff time. That's my staff would have time in preparing baseline reports, preparing environmental evaluations, monitoring, preparing grant applications. So that would be our input from my staff as points of view. The funding sources, you may have heard me say these before, but the Commission of Agriculture has a very important one in North Carolina. He's got a lot of flexibility built into it, and it's an important one. It's called the Agricultural Development Trust Fund. He can provide up to 50% of the appraised fair market value, but also what's good about his program is he can provide some coverage for survey costs. I should say that's a mistake. It's not appraisal, but it's survey costs. But also they can reimburse closing costs. So if we work into his program, we're going to be becoming self-reliant with all the funds we can pull in here. And the federal one is also an important one, but it provides up to 50% of the appraised fair market value. So those are two important funds we have to be going to get if we're going to get in this business. And so the next slide is number 15. In my past work and experience, I would say a typical funding scenario would be a federal ALE, 50%, 25% from the Ag Development Trust Fund, state funds, and then a landowner donates 25%. So he recoups that 25% over time through tax benefits and breaks, et cetera. But then that scenario, the state fund, the ADFP, would help cover some of the survey and closing costs. Now that, to me, is a winning operation right there. So that's kind of what I'd like to see us move to. I think it's one that I am comfortable with in my past work. But I want you guys to know tonight what we're thinking about, and I want you to understand it, and the whole is to support us so you know what we're doing. And if you have different ideas, I'd like to hear it. But what do I need from you right away? Nothing. But this next FY, I'll be looking at closing costs. Closing costs are reimbursable I need a little working funds to work from to get that done. If I'm going to close an easement, have title work, et cetera. So I have discussed it with Rick and Jennifer, but the reason they don't need it right away, Mr. Chairman, is because it takes about 18 months to 24 months to close the easement, once all funds are in place. Think about appraisal time, survey time, et cetera, things like that. So to kind of wind this thing down, I think we have to look at, in Johnston County, and get a lot of good input from our public, is where can conservation easements do the most good? Where do conservation easements really, is it past time? And I'm trying to think about where development is already very dense versus where it's not. Those things are all complicated questions, not easy to answer. But the final thing I'd like to say is one reason I'm here tonight is talking about it's education. We need to educate our public as to what is an easement, is it for you or is it not? And so the final points I want to make, and I'm going to close, some of the take-home points I want you to think about is that I made a point that agriculture is very important. You agree with me on that. Johnston Soil and Water District is ready to go with it. We've got several people interested in easements right now, and they'd like for us to take the lead in it. Conservation easements are voluntary. Make no mistake, they're voluntary. You really wouldn't want to proceed in a conservation easement, search for funds and those kind of things with a family that's not ready to go. That's a waste of time, and you get a lot of, well, it's not going to be very good. Everybody needs to understand thoroughly what it is. So education is going to be very important. I've got an education workshop planned for November. There's no reason we can't do a couple of those a year to bring our public in and start talking about this subject. So I think I'm ready to conclude, and I appreciate the time.
I have a question. As I understand it, an easement's my family farm, let's say. If I put it in an easement, I get reimbursed. I get paid for giving away the development rights. Is that correct?
Yes.
What about, has there been any discussion on the implications of the tax impact for the county's ad valorem taxes?
As far as, I'm not sure that I'm going to answer this question right, but are you talking about what the responsibilities are as a
Well, if me as a landowner, I'm going to get paid for giving up my future profits off of selling for development. But what about the county taxes that would have gone up through that development? Does that make sense? Was any discussion during those, the grants?
I'm going to turn to my partner here, Joe David Austin, who may have a comment on that.
Yeah.
Sure, come on up.
I know in some counties, they have a lot of government land, like the military reservations, and some of those cases where the government owns a lot of land, there's consideration to the counties.
Yeah, and a good example would be Bentonville. A lot of that's good farmland, and fire departments benefit off the tax, ad valorem tax, whatnot. Well, in the meantime, it is obviously a historical Civil War battlefield, and one of these groups are continuing to buy up land, which takes it off the tax rolls, and which hurts the fire department because of taxation and whatnot. So I guess it's similar to the same thing you're asking, right?
I hope I answered this correctly, and I'll get this information for you. I think we've done a feasibility or a cost analysis study for Johnston County in the past that I believe the University of Mount Olive probably did to show the cost of goods and services on easement lands or farmlands. To answer your question first, Mr. Godwin or Commissioner Godwin, I think your farm or a farm typically already is in farm use. So you're only being taxed for that. Right. That will not change. So the owner will still get the benefit of the ad valorem farm use value, and the county's revenue is not really going to change, except the fact that the cost of the county to protect that property, the fire department and so on, will stay less or at least level because it's undeveloped farmland. So, there won't be buildings and things like that for fire departments to protect. Yeah. And police protection.
As I think through my question, it sort of makes sense because there's a lot of services that won't be provided by the county because it's going to be farmland. All right.
Mr. Walker, is there a property size? I mean, is there a minimum property size?
I don't think it is, but I'll make a couple points. In some of the ranking criteria for the state or federal funds, especially the federal ones, it looks at what is the average size tract in Johnston County or a Durham County or a Wayne County, and it compares the offered parcel to that. So there's a point scheme. So it's not really there is not a minimum or a maximum.
And as far as the eligibility to cover up to 50%, I mean, is that things that everybody competes on? So the county might go ahead and pay for closing costs, appraisal, or scratch the closing costs, but appraisal, to survey, and then the applicant get turned down for these funds?
No, you would get the funds in place before you started. The funds for the actual to cover the appraised fair market value. All that will be in place before you start doing a survey.
No, but if the county gives you some money to get surveys done and stuff like that, and then the applicant gets denied, what happens then?
Well, it wouldn't happen that way. Now, what you might want to think about is if the applicant backed out. Well, we want to have things in place where if I've put money into
that'd be a clawback contract, but
yeah. We would not start appraisal or anything else before all the funds were in place. The project is fully in place.
okay, so before we surveyed it, you'd know whether or not they were going to be.
Oh, funded, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So what is the advantage? I'm trying to, I mean, you're giving up the development rights, which I get, and then my question, that's a two-part question. One is what happens 2 generations down the road if I want to get those development rights back? Is that gone forever? I can't do that.
They're gone forever.
Okay. So that's a big step to take. And then there is a minimum farm size for the voluntary ag district, if I remember correctly. So I'm assuming it would, yeah, 20. So it would, I'm assuming it would probably follow somewhere along that.
Well, I can promise you, there is a place where it is so small, it's not going to compete very well.
Right, okay. So what is the, I mean, if I'm sitting here on a family farm, what's my incentive to want to do this?
Well, that's a good question, and when we talk about conservation easements and providing educational workshops for our public, that is a very question we want to be clear. Because some people will say, I want to protect my mom and dad's place, and all our family feels that way. That's the guy you're ready to go with. There could be other people who say, hey, it's not for me.
Well, the decision is.
Have you watched Yellowstone yet?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Look, the decision is going to fall on the current landowner.
Because it's voluntary.
It's his decision. Now, his kids 3 generations down, grandkids or whatnot, might not like the decision the landowner made, but ultimately, you're trying to reach the current landowner, and if they make their mind up that this benefits them,
that's right.
Then it's their situation.
That's right.
But then how does it, that's what I'm trying to understand, how does it benefit the current landowner?
Because he gets paid for his land, and he also makes sure it's not sold for development, or his kids fight over it, or blah, blah, blah.
He gets to sell the lots and keep the land.
There are some people who use those funds to buy other land. There's some people who use those funds to pay off their land debt. So there's lots of reasons people do it outside of
They've not lost their land. They still get to farm it like they always have. They can rent it for farmland. They can run cows. They can do anything but develop it.
Remember the illustration, the bundle of sticks.
Once again, it's the current landowner that's the one that makes the decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I did have, so since we're in the middle of our land use plan update, it seems to me this information would probably be useful for that committee to hear and be a part of that. I don't know how we orchestrate that and coordinate it through Braston, but it seems to me this information that I think all of us are interested in how we do that, but also that committee would probably be interested in hearing and what mechanisms are available, and not to mention, with our parks and greenways and open space stuff, how that can play into it all together. So I think this is, bring it to us is part of the thing that we need to do, but also while we're in the midst of that land use plan update is educating the folks on there about this.
Be happy to contribute.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, public utilities, proposed sedimentation and erosion control fees. Ms. Farmer.
The county is a delegated local government with sedimentation and erosion control approval authority for new development within the county, and we collect plan review fees in order to cover our expenses associated with this program. In August, the governor signed Session Law 121, and this session law, it amends several provisions of the Sedimentation Pollution Control Act of 1973. The general statute amendment actually limits the review fee that local governments can charge for plan review. I have a table before you that outlines our existing sedimentation erosion control review fees and our proposed fees. In order to comply with the statute revision, we do need to amend one of our fees, and that is how we charge the sedimentation and erosion control fees on lots that are already recorded. If a plan review comes before us for the streets are built, the common disturbance is completed, and the lots are recorded, and a developer or a builder needs approval for those lots, we are limited as to the fee that can be charged to $100 per lot. So we are proposing that we modify that particular fee to be $100 per lot. That's the second line item on the chart there in front of you. That's the only one that we would need to amend in order to be compliant with the revised statute.
Basically saying we don't have a choice, it's a mandate.
That's correct.
We just got to vote on it.
This revision will get us in compliance with the new with the modified statute, and the statute requires this to be applicable for all plans submitted on or after October 1st, 2021.
Do we know what the comparative impact would be? I know our lot size is not an acre necessarily, but we're talking about acres and then lot size.
So right now, all of our review fees are based on disturbed acres. You can see it's $380 for a disturbed acre up to 10 acres, then $125 for each additional acre. It's likely we may lose some revenue on some smaller subdivisions, but on the larger subdivisions, it's likely we may actually be the same or potentially more. It just depends on those disturbance and the number of lots.
Let me just some clarity. So the 380 for the 10 acres, is that mandated by the same people that mandate the $100?
No, that's the review fee that we have established as a local government. That's the number that we had come up with to cover our costs for our program. That's the rate that the board has previously adopted.
So this is in our privy that we could change this to
right. So that
level out these costs.
If we wanted to change our existing fees, we could certainly do so. But those are based on covering the expenses of our labor and our program.
Number two is does this fee, does it cover our expenses?
Our existing fees, we have in very recent years been able to recover our full expenses associated with our stormwater and our sedimentation erosion control are coupled together in the fact that we use similar staff for both of those functions, and with the current fees in place, we've been able to fund that program.
So any excess dollars is rolled over, or is there?
It stays in that fund. It would stay there for sedimentation, erosion control review, anything associated with that fund. For example, any outside consulting services we need for currently we're looking at an ordinance update and erosion manual changes, design manual changes to improve our stormwater ordinance. So we use those fees for those expenses.
What about flooding in county areas? Or town areas?
So the county does not operate or maintain any stormwater facilities. So, we don't operate any, we don't maintain ditches, we don't maintain culverts under roads. That's a DOT responsibility.
You approve impervious surfaces.
Right.
Which sends water on down the line.
That's right. That's right. And that's part of what we're looking at in revising our ordinance to require additional attenuation and additional improvements for future development to make the rules more protective.
Or impact of future developments on other adjoining properties or whatever.
Right. So we're looking at those revisions. We've got proposed revisions to increase attenuation requirements for future development. That would add that.
We need to implement this, right? We're mandated.
The revised statute requires this to be effective October 1st.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the revised fees.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second. Any further discussion?
I did have, and I won't get on the regional stormwater stuff tonight, I'll save that for later, but I do, so we service the entire county except for Clayton. At
We
this point.
just provide sedimentation and erosion control for the county's jurisdiction in the town of Benson and the town of Pine Level.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, approval of option to purchase.
Mr. Chairman, we've had a lot of discussion in closed session about this over almost a year. We have had no public discussion, and I would really request that we put this off until next meeting when we've got a full board here to publicly discuss it. So I move we table it till next meeting.
Got a motion?
Second.
Got a second? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So no.
Well,
Unless,
Tie's a no, ain't it?
ties a no, ain't it?
Do we have a tie?
Yeah, I want, well, no, I believe I do want to put it
Yeah,
off
I
to
don't
another meeting. Yeah, if this the way this vote's gonna go down, yeah.
Who was the third no? I know these were no's. Who was the third no?
We don't have a third no, do we?
I'm a yes to put it off,
Oh, yeah, okay.
to save,
It was 4-2.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, All right, next budget revisions, Mr. McClam.
Good evening. Finance has two budget revisions for you tonight from Finance, Public Utilities, and the Leo Separation Fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Law enforcement officer.
So move, we approve.
Second.
We've got a motion, we got a second, is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion?
aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Manager reports and comments. Rick, do you have anything? Board reports and comments. Is there, if there's not any, is there a need for a closed session?
So move, we adjourn.
I think we did have a need for a closed session.
I think there's a need for a closed session.
Our closed session motion, man, this,
Got to be-
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board to go into closed session for purpose of consulting with an attorney employed by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to NCGS 143-31811A3 and discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area pursuant to NCGS 143-31811A4.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carries. We're now in closed session.